All right, here we are. Just getting into July. I'm Tom Novak. This is your Adisseo and Novak weather 30-day outlook now for the month of July. Of course, we like to look back at the past 30 days, so during the month of June, and then get into July. So let's get right to it. These are the temperature anomalies, so the departures from normal during the month of June across southern Canada and the United States. And a couple of things, of course, to focus on is look at all the cooler air up over the southern Canadian plains. We're talking Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta. It's been cool up there. Meanwhile, pretty warm air down in the desert southwest of the U.S. and into the central and southern Rockies. And that warmer air did actually penetrate east into much of the eastern U.S. Long story short, you can clearly see that there's a division between cold and warm across North America. That means there was a jet stream, a strong one that was flowing from west to east across the northern sections of the U.S. and southern Canadian plains, and that was an active jet stream. And I'll show you that in just a little bit as storms were, I'm talking some pretty big storms are traveling from west to east across southern Canada and the northern plains. And that produced a significant amount of rain. In fact, look at this. These are the rain totals now, and these are also the departures from normal during the month of June. And look at all of this rain. We're talking rain 200 to 300% of what is usually normal over the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, portions of Iowa. That would be the western corn belt right here. It was pretty wet here during the month of June. That's because of that jet stream that was flowing from west or northwest to southeast across the United States. We also had some moisture that was coming up into the desert southwest in Rocky Mountains, southern Rocky Mountains. But no doubt the big story was all the rains over a good chunk of the central U.S., especially the north central U.S. and Great Lakes region. Meanwhile, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, was all the dry conditions over the mid-Atlantic and southeastern sections of the U.S. We need to start to improve those conditions. We need moisture in those areas, and I think we're going to get some here in July, especially as you get up here into the mid-Atlantic, and I'll show you that here in just a little bit. Here's your drought map that was just released late last week. And again, a surprise that drought is starting to build over the eastern U.S., so we certainly need some rain in the Carolinas, on north into Virginia and the good chunk of the mid-Atlantic. But where there was a drought at the start of the spring is now gone over the Corn Belt. Much of the Corn Belt has plenty of moisture right now, and you'd have to go further south here into the southern plains to get some drought conditions that continue to persist. And I am a little worried, especially over Texas and Oklahoma and Kansas here, that the drought's going to start to deepen here and take hold even more as we get into July, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. Here's your jet stream. This is the European Computer Model Guidance now. I'm going to rewind this for you, and this is the jet stream now in early July, and watch what happens just as we go through time. I just want you to focus on these areas of strong winds and these storm systems that develop over the north central portions of the U.S. and southern Canadian plains. This is a real strong jet stream that just doesn't show any signs of weakening here during July. So this June weather pattern of wet and cool conditions up here over southern Canada and the northern sections of the U.S., I think are going to continue at least into mid-July. Here you get towards July 10th and 11th, and we still have a strong jet stream flowing from northwest to southeast across the U.S. Now, when we look at the GFS computer model guidance and we go further into July, and again, look at this jet stream weather pattern. Just a classic stormy weather pattern up in the northern sections of the U.S. But look at what's happening as we get into mid-July, and I want you to focus on here in the southern Rockies and portions of the desert southwest and southern plains. There's a building ridge in those areas, and that's why I'm concerned that this area is really going to heat up here over the southern and portions of the western sections of the U.S. as the strong and active jet stream continues to stay north over the southern Canadian prairies on east and southeast into the northern plains and Great Lakes region, and then hopefully eventually into the mid-Atlantic where they need some moisture. But yes, I just don't see any break in the June weather pattern that is now spilling into July. That's the reason why when you look at the 30-day temperature outlook here from Adisseo and Novak Weather, you can see I'm still expecting that jet stream to be active, strong, and flowing west or northwest to southeast across the southern Canadian prairies and then into the heart of the U.S. and then eventually off the east coast in the mid-Atlantic. This keeps cooler air to the north and east of the jet stream from warmer air and probably some real hot air to the south and west of this active jet stream. And yes, that means there's likely going to be some storms in between, near and along this jet stream, this real active jet stream that just doesn't show any signs of weakening through July. And here it is. This is the moisture now, what I'm expecting for precipitation over southern Canada and North America. And yes, it has been wet for the last couple of months up in the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, the western and central Corn Belt. And I think that's going to continue here into July with periods of showers and thunderstorms, and some of them containing heavy rains. I'm also worried about flooding conditions up here in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. And hopefully we can get some of that moisture to continue east into the mid-Atlantic, where they are starting to get pretty dry in the eastern sections of the U.S. Meanwhile, if we don't get any tropical storms to move north into the southern sections or the deep south of the U.S. and into the southern plains, then we're really going to dry out here over Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And then that dry weather likely will extend east into portions of the Gulf of Mexico. We'll see here, but I mean, I'm getting pretty concerned about a prolonged dry period and hot period over Texas, portions of Oklahoma and Kansas, and then that would extend back northwest into the northwestern sections of the U.S. and portions of southwestern Canada. But yes, this is a kind of a classic summer weather pattern where real hot air develops over the southern sections of the U.S. Now, when we finally look at the National Drought Concern Map, and here it is, I'm expecting the drought conditions to increase over the southern and portions of central plains. Meanwhile, where a drought is starting to develop over the eastern U.S., I am expecting that drought to ease, especially as you head north into the mid-Atlantic and the eastern sections of the Corn Belt and portions of New England. Meanwhile, yes, the flooding rains, or at least periodic heavy rains, could produce some flooding conditions up in the north central sections of the U.S. It would likely extend back northwest into portions of southern Canada. So Manitoba and Saskatchewan likely going to get more periodic showers and thunderstorms, as the western sections of the U.S. and portions of southwestern Canada, just in general, are going to be really dry and probably pretty warm, if not hot, here as we go through the month of July. All right, that is your Adisseo and Novak Weather July 30-day outlook. I appreciate you joining me. We will talk to you in August.